Started. Only item on the agenda today is hearing on Bill HB 2287. And we'll go ahead and open that hearing, and we'll start with a update from the reviser. Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I believe in your packet there should be a memorandum that was authored by our education revisers, and so I'll just go through that. House Bill 2287 would enact the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act, would establish the program. It would be administered by the State Board of Regents. Subject to appropriations, the program would provide scholarships to eligible students for up to 2 years to attend eligible post-secondary educational institutions in an associate degree program or career and technical education program in certain job fields and career pathways that are identified by the Board of Regents. After completion of the program, the scholarship recipient will be required to work in Kansas for 2 years. Eligible post-secondary educational institution is defined on page 1 of the bill. It includes technical colleges, community colleges, 2-year associate degree programs, or career and technical education programs offered by private, not the public institutions, but by private 4-year post-secondary educational institutions. Section 1 is the definitions section. Section 2 on the bottom of page 1 of the bill would establish the program to administered by the Board of Regents. There is a list of actions and things that the State Board of Regents must do under this bill. First, it must work with community partners, community foundations, school districts, post-secondary educational institutions, Kansas business and industry, Kansas economic development organizations to publicize and promote the scholarship program. The Board of Regents must allocate funds to each eligible post-secondary educational institution for the program. It must request information necessary for the administration of the program from eligible post-secondary educational institutions. Annually collaborate with the Department of Commerce and Kansas business and industry to identify up to 10 job fields and pathways that currently have the highest need for skilled employees, and designate scholarship eligible career and technical programs and transfer education programs that correspond to those 10 identified job fields and pathways. The regents are to ensure that any student who receives a Kansas Promise Scholarship fulfills the employment or repayment requirements that are set forth subsequently in this bill, and annually evaluate the program and prepare and submit a report to the House and Senate Education Committees on the program. The board is also required to adopt rules and regulations. There's a deadline of March 1st, 2022 for the implementation and administration of the program. These rules and regulations are to include scholarship application deadlines, appeal procedures for the denial or revocation of a scholarship, guidelines to ensure that credits earned in the program would transfer to another post-secondary educational institution, including 4-year institutions, procedures for a student to record and report proof of community service and community service hours as they are obligated to do, terms, conditions, and requirements to be included in each scholarship agreement with a student, between the student and the institution, procedures for requesting and approving medical, military, and personal absence from the program, criteria for determining whether students have fulfilled the employment and repayment requirements of the program, and criteria for determining when a student may be released from the requirements of the program if there are special circumstances. that cause the student not to be able to fulfill the requirements. The scholarship awards are set forth in Section 3. The amounts, the total appropriation would not exceed $10 million in any fiscal year for the program. The amounts of the scholarships are to be determined based on whether the student is enrolled at a 2-year institution or a 4-year educational institution. For students enrolled at a 2-year institution, the amount includes tuition, fees, and materials for the educational program, minus the grants, scholarships, or financial assistance awards to the student that do not require payback. For a student enrolled in a private 4-year institution, the scholarship amount is the average of the aggregate tuition, fees, books, and materials for the program as it would be at a community college or technical college. Student eligibility requirements are set forth in Section 4. These include that the student must be a Kansas resident, a graduate of a Kansas public or private secondary school, or have obtained a high school equivalency certificate within the preceding 12 months. There is an exception for this requirement if the student is the dependent child of a military service member permanently stationed in another state. The student must complete the required scholarship application forms, enter into the agreement, complete the free application for federal student aid, enroll in the eligible post-secondary educational institution in a scholarship eligible career and technical education program or associate degree program. To continue to receive a scholarship, a student must annually complete 100 hours of community service or work part-time, maintain a minimum cumulative 2.0 GPA, and satisfy any other requirements of the agreement. Section 5 pertains to the agreement, the scholarship agreement. It establishes requirements for the agreement that students must enter into with the educational institution that is making the scholarship award. The agreement shall require the student to enroll as a full-time student at the institution and complete the program or associate, either the career technical program or the associate degree program. Within 6 months after graduation, either start work in Kansas for at least 2 consecutive years or enroll as a full-time student in a 4-year post-secondary educational institution, so long as upon graduation or a failure to re-enroll in the 4-year institution, the student starts work in Kansas for at least 2 consecutive years. The student must maintain records and make reports to the State Board of Regents as required by the board to document that the requirements of the program are being met. And upon failure to satisfy the program requirements, repay the scholarship amount. Subsection B of Section 5 addresses the scholarship repayment requirements. Any money repaid would be credited to the state general fund. Subsection C of Section 5 allows the Board of Regents to postpone any requirement of the bill of the and of the agreement rather that is made between the student and the school for a good cause. Subsection D would establish the ways in which students who receive a scholarship can satisfy the scholarship obligations, including completing the requirements of the program, or if failing to satisfy the requirements of the program, the student has made the best possible effort to do so. Being unable to obtain employment upon graduation, failing to satisfy the requirements of the program due to a permanent physical disability or death. Section 6 is a moratorium. It would establish a moratorium on the program so that on and after July 1, 2026, no Kansas Promise Scholarship would be awarded to any student who had not previously been awarded a Kansas Promise Scholarship. This bill, if enacted, would take effect on July 1st, 2021. And that is what the bill does.
Charles, committee, any questions for the reviser? Okay, Charles, there's some limits in here I see, but this scholarship kicks in only after all federal monies have been exhausted. They have to fill out the normal FASBA forms in order to qualify for this, correct?
Chairman, I believe that's correct. I'll try and find that precise language in the bill. So, Chairman, on page 3 of the bill, section 3, there's language there that discusses the amount of the scholarship. In line 6 of page 3, it references that the amount of the scholarship is, tuition, books, that kind of thing, required fees, minus the aggregate amount of all other aid awarded to such student for such semester. Aid includes any grant, scholarship, or financial assistance awards that do not require repayment. So there's also a provision, as you noted, that the student must make application under the FAFSA.
Okay, so committee, just to kind of point out, I think the state of Tennessee does a similar program like this. There's a $10 million limit on these scholarships, but we don't anticipate getting anywhere close to that for many, many, many years. We've got, from our experience, from the experiences of other states anyway, it seems that once they fill out the proper paperwork for college application and financial aid, most of them qualify. These are students that right now are sitting at home thinking that there's no future for them. They don't have a lot of money. They're not really interested in school, but they have some technical skills that they'd like to try to elaborate on. These kids will be able to have hope. They'll fill out the forms. They'll realize that they have a scholarship and that they qualify for financial aid. Many of them will end up going to a normal 4-year education. It's eye-opening from what we're hearing. People that think that they just don't have a future, that all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, I can go to college, I can be somebody, I can hone a skill, and I can make some money and raise a family. I had a meeting with Johnson County Community College a few years back. They had a plan that was similar to this. Not sure if it ever got off the ground, but it made a lot of sense just to have these kids to sit down and fill out the proper paperwork to try to qualify. They were going to give free tuition to the lower end of the people that came through. And I think that they found also that once they filled out the paperwork that there really wasn't a whole lot of dollars to be put in from their end because they all qualified for financial aid. And these junior colleges and technical schools don't really cost that much. Tuition only covers tuition and fees, not room and board. And so we're not really expecting a large fiscal note on that, even though there's a $10 million limit. Representative Williams, did you have a question?
I think the representative to my left was able to answer that, but just on another point here, the Board of Regents, they will be the ones determining what those approved subject matters are for a degree, for the career. Charles, could you hear me? So the Board of Regents, they would be the ones to determine what degrees are accepted for this program?
Yes.
Okay.
Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the reviser, and I apologize if you covered this, Chuck, but could you, I know that we saw the Kansas Promise bill last year. Can you just remind us of what the outcome of that was? And then also, could you just highlight, is this the same bill that we saw last year, or could you highlight what those differences are between the version this year and last year?
Representative, I will quick look up what happened last year to this bill and get back to you before the committee is over. I may have to pass on the differences between this bill and last bill. I think I'm just not sure about that. Our education advisors drafted it, so I might have to defer to them and get back to you on that.
Representative, when we had the bill drafted, we had it drafted as it was passed from the chamber of the whole on the House side, and so it's identical to that. I think we did request one change. The last year's bill said that if the state of Kansas is going to pay for your school for 2 years, that you had to work in Kansas for 2 years. This year we requested a change. I didn't see it in there, but we requested a change to say that you live and work in Kansas. But Chuck or Charles, did that make that in there?
The requirements with respect to Kansas, I think, are found. I think there is a requirement to work in Kansas. I'm trying to find it here. Yeah, if you look at page 4 of the bill, one of the conditions to receiving a scholarship pursuant to the agreement terms are to require that in lines 23 to 27, enroll as a full-time student with a primary location in Kansas, and upon graduation or failure to re-enroll as a full-time student in such institution, commence work in Kansas for at least 2 consecutive years following the completion of the program. So I believe that is the reference that the requirement that you were referring to. Is that correct, Chairman?
It is, but we wanted to be specific that you also lived in Kansas. But we can make that change when we work on the bill. And we'll wait to see how this bill passed. I want to say we got at least 120 votes on it last year to get it out on the House side. It also came back in the overall education bill that had a couple of things added to it. And I want to say we passed it with 122 votes, and the Senate passed it with 37 votes, but it was vetoed. Does that answer your question, Representative Curtis?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Any further questions for the reviser? Seeing none, we can move on to testimony. Proponents, we'll start with Heather Morgan, Executive Director of the Kansas Association of Community Colleges. Heather, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To start a little bit to answer Representative Curtis's question, this is the exact bill that was vetoed, the portion of the Promise Scholarship Act. It did pass the House last year 110-3, and the Senate 37-2. The live and work piece is not in the bill, but we can work on that at conference. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Heather Morgan. I represent the 19 Kansas community colleges. Community colleges provide 70% of the technical education in the state of Kansas. We have been primarily in person. Since the pandemic started, it's a little difficult to deliver technical education in person, but we've been very keenly aware that what we do at our colleges directly impacts the Kansas workforce and Kansas businesses. We are a proponent of the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act, and I'd like to talk a little bit about Representative Tarwater's question about this being a last dollar scholarship. So a student who might be interested in one of the 10 most high demand occupations, so think about advanced manufacturing, information technology, healthcare, welding, electricians, those things that we all need to keep the Kansas economy moving. A student's interested in that, they would come in and they would do a simple application form. They would fill out the FAFSA. If they're a low-income student, they will likely not qualify for this scholarship program. In my testimony, you can see that the average Pell Award in the state of Kansas is $3,600 a semester. The cost of tuition and books at a Kansas community college is $1,700 a semester. So if someone is receiving a full Pell Grant, they will not receive any of these scholarships. These scholarships are more for low to moderate income. Maybe mom and dad have, minimum wage jobs, or maybe $30,000, $40,000 a year jobs with 3 kids. Those are the students that will qualify under this scholarship. The key point of this is you're using state dollars and requiring someone to live and work in the state. We know from an economic development perspective, once a student is living and working in Kansas for a number of years, they're more likely to stay. So the way that this would work is that it would allow the student to complete either a certificate up to an associate's degree at a community or technical college, or there weren't any questions about this, but it's a little confusing, if they are attending a private four-year university like one of the ks.gov schools who has a technical program in these areas. There's only about 2 or 3 that will probably qualify. And the scholarship at those institutions will be paid at the average of the community and technical college rate. 44% of Kansas students receive a Pell Grant, so most of those would not qualify. So if you take our total student enrollment, subtract 44%, that's the possible students who would qualify for this. We know that a lot of students might receive an athletic scholarship, an academic scholarship, a Rotary Club scholarship. So all of those students and all of those dollars will be added together before any of this Kansas Promise scholarship money would kick in. This program is also a rural revitalization tool. Again, as you think about finding an electrician, a plumber, a CNC operator, those are really in-demand occupations across our state, and not only providing the world-class education, but keeping the students here is a key part of this program. The Board of Regents is required to work with the Kansas Department of Commerce, and I think the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, to determine the 10 most in-demand occupation jobs. We know that the needs of Johnson County are different than the needs of Seward County, and so making sure that we maybe have ag tech versus IT. All of those programs available under this program are important. As the chairman mentioned, Tennessee has had a program, but a number of other states have programs like this. This is an economic development tool. It allows us to educate our kids and keep them here, and hopefully living and working in Kansas. Again, the fiscal note is, we believe, higher than it would actually be by quite a lot. There is a cap in the bill at $10 million. The Senate is working on a Promise Act bill too. I'm leaving after I testify to go down. They're going to work that and hopefully kick it out of Senate Education today. There was bipartisan support of this idea last year. It got vetoed in the height of the pandemic. House leadership has this as one of their pillars to really get the Kansas economy back on track and have a way for us to be able to graduate students in the most high demand fields in Kansas so that they can go to work for Kansas companies. You talk to any economic developers, the #1 issue facing Kansas companies is skilled workforce. You can't expand and you can't grow if you don't have a skilled workforce, and this is a great tool to help us fix that problem in the state, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Any questions, committee? Any online? Representative Dodson, anybody online?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question. Can you, since I'm new, what was the rationale for the veto?
Money. Okay. Not enough of it.
Any other questions? I've got a couple. You mentioned that you didn't call them private, but the schools that aren't community college, what'd you call them?
Technical schools are the ks.gov type schools like Bethany, Benedictine, Kansas Wesleyan, my alma mater.
Okay, right, so those, they would get an average of what we would pay our schools, right?
Correct.
So will they charge these students in addition to that, or have they agreed to take that and only that?
I don't believe they agreed to take that and only that, but they are fully aware that the student will not get a full scholarship. And I think it's Heston and possibly Donley would be the two private schools that would likely have these programs. Possibly Barclay just added a healthcare program, so maybe Barclay as well.
Okay, well, I know they're listening. I'd like to hear back from them by
Yeah,
email.
Matt Lindsay can get back with you, and I'll text him when I leave.
Okay. Any other questions? One more. So our Regent schools right now, we're being told that 64% of our students leave the state when they graduate, 64%. And we invest literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in these kids when you count K through 12 all the way through college. 64% leave. Can you give me an idea of like the junior colleges, how, when you pass a kid out, do you have better numbers than that?
We believe that about 80% of Kansas community and technical colleges kids stay in Kansas. Most of our students are part-time. 80% of our students are part-time, so they're already working a job in the local community and going to school. So the vast majority of our students do stay in the state.
So the key is to get them working and living in Kansas.
Right.
Wichita State, I think, does a really good job of that with their innovation campus. I think their numbers are more in the 70s that stay home.
The key part of this is it's for Kansas recently graduated Kansas high school students. So that high school student who is maybe making a decision to go to, we'll just pick on Oklahoma Christian or Oklahoma State, and is going to go into maybe an ag, like a precision ag type career. This might make them say, wow, I could get my first 2 years of college paid for, and then I'm staying in Kansas rather than going to Oklahoma State and maybe going to Oklahoma or Texas or Dallas.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to take Kevin Walker.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kevin Walker, Overland Park Chamber of Commerce. Appreciate the opportunity to be here in support of this bill. I will leave the kind of the mechanics of the bill and the processes that are in here to the experts in the educational community. I think they're best able to address those mechanics. I just wanted to focus a little bit on the workforce aspect. As we are talking to our members, we are continually hearing of concerns of finding skilled workers. This is an ongoing problem. I think this bill specifically addresses that and presents a good solution for the state of Kansas. You know, right now there is a tremendous emphasis on four-year education. That seems to be where everybody wants to focus their kid to go. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but for some of our students, that is not the career path that they want. They may not be prepared for that, and so this provides an alternative for students to give serious consideration to training in these skilled trades, in these technical trades. We all know there are tremendous opportunities there. They can earn a very good living doing those types of trades and skills, and so we think this really is a good opportunity to present Kansas students a different pathway to career success. As has been stated already, the idea that these students would get some training, there's a greater likelihood they're going to stay in Kansas, which is something I think we all want to see. We know right now we are experiencing a net negative in terms of migration, out-migration, and anything we can do to help keep Kansas kids and Kansas students in Kansas and part of our workforce moving forward, we think is a very positive step. I'll leave it there for now, Mr. Chairman, and answer any questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Any questions, committee? Any online? Seeing none. Next up, we'll take Jessica Lucas. She's with the Wichita Chamber today. In committee, her testimony didn't quite get in right, so I believe she's emailed it to Cindy, who probably emailed it to you guys, so make sure you have it. Make sure everybody can pull that up before she starts.
Thanks, everyone. Again, my name is Jessica Lucas, and I'm here today on behalf of the Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce. And as Kevin said, skilled workforce is a need across the state and is certainly a need in the South Central region, where we have advanced manufacturing needs, IT needs, building trades, and healthcare. So this program is something that we supported last year. We're proud to be here supporting it again. And I want to impress upon you, it was in 2012 that this body passed Senate Bill 155. Today we call it Career and Technical Education. It's one of those programs that has, I would venture to say, nearly universal support, and something we're very, very proud of. It's been providing high school students with an opportunity to get skills training and go straight into the workforce. In my view, this is the second step to that. We support it because it will give us another tool, and for any kid that's maybe late to coming into these opportunities that Senate Bill 155 provides, this enables them to continue to get their skills training, perhaps get additional skills training, and set them up to be able to live, work, and raise a family in Kansas. So we believe that education and workforce training is critical to the sustainability and prosperity of the South Central region, and appreciate that this bill is an important tool and something that I hope I can continue to say in future years, not just talking about Senate Bill 155, but also a champion for House Bill 2287 and the opportunities that it's afforded our young people. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none.
All right, thank you.
Okay, batting cleanup for those that are in person is Mike Gibson from AGC of Kansas Construction Industry.
Good afternoon, Chair, Committee. What a great day. What you're seeing right now is another spoke in the wheel that you as champions for workforce and education is all about in House Bill 2287. Right now, this country is going through a major crisis generated by Mother Nature. I don't care along the Gulf Coast all the way up here. Right now, people are desperate for electricians, heating, venting, air conditioning, and plumbers because of the extreme temperatures that are going on. Our industry is one of the largest industries in Kansas, even though we're not concentrated like aviation and some others. We are very expansive. Last night I sent each of you a news story that was done here about a couple of weeks ago by the CBS affiliate in Wichita that interviewed a recent graduate from one of the technical high schools, Bishop Carroll. It's one of 125 high schools that Associated General Contractors of Kansas and its 300 construction firms represent and work. We just don't talk about it. We actually do something about it and have been for the last 20 years because we recognize that our industry is dependent on the younger generation to replace the aging workforce that we have. But in that story, this young gentleman out of Pratt who didn't know what he was going to do for a living, he knew he wasn't going to be able to go to college, got into a vocational program once his parents relocated to Wichita out of pure accident, and learned some basic skills in that vocational program. And that student, upon graduation from Bishop Carroll High School vocational program in Wichita, went to work for Drywall Systems of Wichita, which is a Kansas-based company. This gentleman is now going to turn 21 here in a couple months. He's making $38,000 a year. And his boss tells me in the next couple of years, he'll surpass $45,000 a year. This is with a vocational high school degree. I want you to think about that just a little bit. I also want you to think about a high school student that graduated last year from Pittsburgh High School, who through Senate Bill 155, which I have given major accolades, not just to this body, but to my colleagues around the country, who are trying to emulate 155, Senate Bill 155 in their respective states because they've seen such a great success here in Kansas. But this student came up to me and told me that Pittsburgh High School created a welding vocational program because of Senate Bill 155 funding. He graduated last year and is making $45 an hour at 19 years old. Think about those two examples real quick. What kind of impact that has in terms of growth personally and professionally, tax base that those gentlemen are going to generate. They're going to stay in Kansas. They're going to start a family. We're going to reverse this trend of out-migration. And as I've mentioned, this body is the hub of the wheel. House Bill 2287 is another spoke in the wheel to strengthen that workforce development tool. AGC of Kansas is the leader, bar none, of working with our community colleges and high schools across the state to produce real results in terms of a skilled workforce, not just for construction. We're now talking to other industries about cross-training to where one industry downsizes, they don't leave the state, they just move over into another industry. And the private sector is going to make that happen with your help. But this particular bill is going to give those two gentlemen, which, oh, by the way, I keep up with on a monthly basis, it's opened their eyes to realize as they progress in their professional career that they never thought about a 4-year degree or a 2-year community college degree, but now recognize they have the kind of personalities that they want to grow, maybe to even start a business, that the only way they get there is enrolling in their local community college, which, oh, by the way, has some great construction trades programs, and our 4-year institutions like Fort Hays State, like Pittsburgh State, like Kansas State, Wichita State, KU, and others for engineering and construction sciences, to where they can then reach to higher levels of success. And those, ladies and gentlemen, are going to be the success stories that we're going to look back on and realize that each one of y'all were the pioneers to make that happen. We are so excited about what this potentially will lead to, that this go around, it's going to be hard pressed to veto something like this. And I realize money is very tight, but this is an investment that's already proven results, just like Senate Bill 155. I will remind you, when you passed that, we went from a little less than 30 high schools and community colleges to almost overnight 125 plus partnering with us to get access to our training curriculum because it had a credential component to meet Senate Bill 155. And I will suggest that this same investment is going to return multiple returns on that investment that we'll look back and go, why didn't we do this earlier? Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate each and every one of your committee's leadership, and this association and its 300 construction firms and 9,000 employees, which represent both organized labor and open shop, stand ready to continue to work to move these things forward and produce the kind of results that the taxpayers look for in your decision making. I stand for any questions.
Thanks, Mike. Dynamic and passionate as always. Appreciate when you come up here and open our eyes to these types of things. I wasn't here when Senate Bill 155 passed. I'm very familiar with it now because of working with you and other people in the industry. Can you, and there's a lot of new people on this committee, can you speak to what Senate Bill 155 was and is?
Well, I will give your colleagues and a previous governor a lot of accolades for understanding the value of vocational training. You just had a conferee just state that, unfortunately, for the last 30 or 40 years, mainly out of Washington, D.C., all of our educators have been judged in their success by how many people they send to a 4-year institution. And I think everybody now has recognized that that may have been a mistake, or at least not been diversified enough. And there was discussions about how this state could put its money where its mouth is to provide a carrot, if you would, or an incentive for high schools and community colleges to be our ambassadors in their respective schools, because remember, prior to Senate Bill 155 passing, a lot of those programs were dismantled. A lot of the vocational programs were dismantled by their respective school districts because they were being judged on how many people went out to four-year institutions. And again, there are kids that want to go to four-year colleges. There are kids that want to go to community colleges, but there's a lot of kids that don't or can't afford it. And so what you were able to do was pass and provide $1,000 incentive per student that enrolled into a vocational program, but it had to have a credentialed curriculum. Aviation had, construction had, healthcare, and other vocational industries had credentials that would meet that aspect. You just couldn't get the $1,000 and just say you're starting something. There had to be that credential to support the programming that you got. That's why we had a lot of schools, over almost 90 overnight, contact us, because we had a curriculum that was developed by construction for construction, and it was easily adapted by the educators. They didn't have to go recreate the wheel, and they loved it. Not to mention, we provided a lot of resources, like if they were short equipment and things of the nature, we could get our manufacturer and suppliers to donate some of those equipment. All they wanted maybe was a banner hanging up in the practical lab. So that was the incentive, the spark that really reinvigorated and reinforced that the state of Kansas was serious about vocational training. And I think that also sent a strong message. In fact, I know the aviation industry I work real closely with, because we have like issues with workforce, agriculture, energy, like Evergy. They've all told me the same thing. That gave them the signal that you as policymakers were serious about vocational programming, whereas some of those industries were saying, maybe we need to look at another state to move to. So whether that was an indirect or a direct result of your decision making, I will suggest to you it sent not just a ripple effect, but a tsunami to business and industry that Kansas was serious about supporting vocational programming. And not just to do it by state funding, because it sent a message to entice industry to step up and be a partner in a public-private partnership, to where resources were coming together, both public and private, to really enhance and elevate the status of vocational programming in the state. Not to mention, and you've heard me say this, if you really step away from and look at the big picture, what Senate Bill 155 has done is draw more kids into vocational programming, which becomes a feeder system into the community colleges, which becomes a feeder system into the four-year institutions. It's a food chain. And if one part of that food chain gets disrupted, the entire system is subject to collapse. So what you're looking at here in House Bill 2287 is a supplemental success story to what Senate Bill 155 is. Is that kind of?
The way I understand it, there was also, I'm not sure if it was in Senate Bill 155 or another bill, but there was also some assistance in purchasing the required tools for the student. Is that what's being provided by you guys, or is that?
And whatever shortfalls, the industry has made up the difference. Because we as industry recognize that once those programs launched, we don't want to see them stop like they did 15, 20 years ago. So we have some built-in incentives to step up. I have personally reached out as the head of AGC of Kansas to talk to manufacturer reps about donating a sheet metal brake or some electrical conduit, or like we're doing at El Dorado Correctional Facility, donating for the masonry program. There's 100 low-risk inmates out at El Dorado Correctional Facility that we donate. Monarch Cement donates concrete, cement, and block because the facility doesn't have the resources, the financial resources to address those things. And we're doing that in the high schools and community colleges too.
Yeah, so the kids are out there, I'll tell you that. I met with Blue Valley High School shop class on a teacher informational day or whatever. And I met with the shop class teachers from all the schools, and they see a huge need for something like this. We were talking actually about the liability bill that I had a couple of years ago to open doors. But these kids they're in high school, and for the most part, they're looking out the window, not paying attention. Well, right now, a lot of them are at home looking out the window, but they're looking out the window, they're not paying that close of attention. Then they get to shop class and they start working with their hands, they start building something, and they wake up. And then as they progress through that, they do better in their other classes. So you want to touch on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, again, I'll remind you of the real-life story down in Pittsburgh. That student would not have been given the opportunity to get into a welding vocational program at his local high school if it wasn't for Senate Bill 155. In fact, he told me more about 155 than most people know about, and was his instructor and himself were saying we were so appreciative of having that opportunity. But to go back to your original question on what's going on right now with the schools being remote, AGC and its construction contractors have a speakers bureau. We're working with the VOTEC directors because a lot of them are frustrated because you can't teach carpentry over the internet. I think everybody finally came to that conclusion not too long ago. So what we arranged with the different VOTEC directors, starting in Garden City, Salina, Manhattan, here at Washburn Technology, in Topeka, the community colleges in Wichita, and down at Fort Scott, is we're having industry leaders speak to the VOTEC students through a virtual conference call. And we're also connecting them to manufacturer reps. The VOTEC directors can tap in. A lot of manufacturer and suppliers across the country have a lot of virtual information they use to sell to contractors, their supplies and materials. And we're using that to keep the students energized, because what we're hearing across the state is students that are in VOTEC programs are getting frustrated because they can't learn over the internet carpentry or HVAC or welding right now because of some of the COVID restrictions. And the VOTEC directors asked us, could we come up with a plan to keep their students fired up? Because some of the students were saying, maybe I need to get out of VOTEC because I'm not learning what I thought I was going to learn. So I know we're all discussing about it's time to get our kids back into school as quickly as possible. That's one of the main reasons right there from a VOTEC perspective is you can't teach driving a nail or welding metal or the electrical side of things over the internet. So industry is coming up with workarounds for a short period of time, but we're doing it because, again, we have a built-in incentive as industry to make sure the momentum that you as policymakers and leaders in this state started with Senate Bill 155 and will be supplemented with this particular bill here today continues. If we don't have vocational programming, I have said this to several of you in the past. Our chief economist, his name is Ken Simonson out of Washington, D.C. We're one of the few trade associations in the country that has a full-time chief economist. There is over $8 trillion of private money sitting on the sidelines looking for states to invest. Some of those states, they're taking out of states that are not user-friendly, and they're looking to go to other states. Might I remind you, California and New York are two that come to mind. But we have a great business environment. We have plenty of land in this state. And if we can put our heads together to ratchet up and really work collectively with you as policymakers and industry, we can solve the workforce issues, and we're going to get our chunk of that private dollars. I can promise you that, because I've talked to a lot of economic development people, and it won't take much for us to get their attention.
Representative Williams.
Sorry, somehow I did not hear.
It's okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So since SB 155, that was about, 8 years ago, have we, two-part question, have we seen, this may be a better question for Heather Morgan, but she's gone, have we seen our skills gap in Kansas be reduced because of Senate Bill 155? And if not, now 8 years later, do you think that we have a misalignment in our credentials, because so often the academic world is not talking or communicating effectively with the business world? And, manufacturing companies, other technical skilled businesses are still not finding the right skills for employment. And so is there a misalignment, a miscommunication? Do we have old credentials out there, kids going through the program that are not helping?
Well, I'll give you an example. What Senate Bill 155 did, go back, the carrot, the attention getter. I'll give you a real live example. And again, we're the only organization that can give you this type of data, and I charge you, call me at any time with any question, because I deal with this. I live and breathe it every day. Manhattan Area Technical College, up until 3 years ago, was building birdhouses in their vocational programming. And they recognize that, and this is not to demean them. They're doing a great job now, because what they recognize, and they came to us, they said, how do we position ourselves to attract the lion's share of the construction industry to align with us to launch a new vocational program for construction? And we want to use your NCCR curriculum, which, oh, by the way, doesn't build birdhouses, is really constructing commercial, industrial, the type trained individuals to be qualified for that. In less than 6 months, Manhattan Area Technical College embraced NCCR curriculum, created an advisory council of industry leaders up there, and now they're producing good quality candidates that the industry is hiring as soon as they graduate, of which most are making in excess of $35,000 to start. So that answers the first part. The second one, there are some disconnects out there, but I would suggest to you that I think the disconnects are becoming less and less, because people are recognizing what they're producing is not, if everybody was doing what they said they were doing, we wouldn't be in the challenge that we're in right now for skilled labor. We can always be better, and I think that's where business and industry got together and said, we're going to step up and do our part, but our role is to give guidance. Ours is real easy. When you've got a curriculum that's a turnkey process, those educators wake up real quick. Now, if you're an industry that doesn't have a curriculum, but has some other things, it may be a little slower to get the educators on board. But Senate Bill 155 helped close that gap, because it incentivized them to get bodies in the seats and then adopt a curriculum that they could implement immediately. So we stand ready to continue to close those communication gaps. But I know in this state, like other states, may not have as much dealing with local control. Some of that local control sometimes becomes an impediment. But in my experience, in the 10 years I've been in Kansas, I've seen a real receptiveness by our high schools and community colleges to step up and make significant changes in their processes, because they recognize they're being pressured by their parents to say, what's my son or daughter going to do once they get out of your high school? And now they're starting to say, oh, we've got a Voc Tech program. Oh, these kids can make X amount of dollars coming right out of school that's not minimum wage. And oh, by the way, they're going to, like the student that out of Pittsburgh, he's going to stay in the Pittsburgh area. He wants to stay close to his parents, and he's going to make over $100,000 a year doing so. I know I kind of skirted some of it, but there's more work to do. I would strongly encourage that the powers to be within education, all they have to do is reach out to trade associations. The trade associations are where the rubber hits the road. I said this in another committee a couple of weeks ago. The Restaurant Association has their tentacles out within the restaurant group. AGC has its tentacles. We have we are the heartbeat of what these companies are all about. And some other groups may be so large that they get watered down, and they only cater to a few people. I would suggest that if education will continue to work with their trade associations in this state, that we can get things done quicker and more successful. Because it's like I've described my job. My job's like a library in a library. That's an antiquated analogy, but the fact is I have access to a lot of resource materials that I probably don't know everything that's about every level or in that resource, but I can pick when I have an educator call me and say, hey, I've got this particular problem, we're short some materials, or I need some equipment, I can say, send me an email on that. Let me get with a couple manufacturer reps, and I get a hold of them, and within a relatively short period of time, we're able to connect the dots. That's something that some other groups in this state may not be able to do because they can't play favorites. But there are specific trade associations that can respond because they have an incentive to, because they need workers just like other industries do.
Mr. Chair, I know that Heather Morgan just walked in, but in terms of auditing our programs and making sure that there's not a misalignment and that the credentials actually can be used to fill a gap in our economy, would be interesting information if that's logged, tracked, so that we know. I feel like you do have some of that information, and I can certainly get with you later on that.
I defer to her on that, but like I said, since the inception of 155, we have had not just a resurgence with the educators. We've got industry, like I said, remember, it was a message that you sent to industry that we were serious about not only our vocational programming and our skilled workforce, but we're serious about keeping our youth in Kansas. I told somebody the other day, what kind of legacy are we going to leave behind if the kids that are born here are raised here and educated here, and then when they get ready to get out of school, they decide to go to a neighboring state and we outsource our brain power? That's a tragedy, in my opinion. And since I've been here, the quality of life in this state is second to none. And I've been all over this country. And I can assure you with COVID, that has been elevated to the next level to where people are going, maybe I want to move to a smaller state where I have freedom of movement and I have the quality of life that I expect for myself and my family.
Well, I think the first question wasn't answered. So if someone is able to answer that, and that really is, since Senate Bill 55, 8 years ago, do we have a reduction in the skills gap, or are the skills changing? So what we're credentialing is no longer adequate, and so therefore that gap just stays. So if anybody is able to address that, to let us know, are we making progress or not? Because the numbers don't look like our gap's getting smaller. So that may mean that our credentials need to change.
Well, from a construction perspective, the skill levels are improving because they're using our curriculum to teach what we want to see. And it's in a modular format where they get a lifelong credential that they can take with them. Oh, by the way, what I sent to you last night in terms of the news story that was done on Build Up Kansas, Build Up Kansas has a component, an HR platform that our contractors are posting their entry-level positions and their higher-level positions so those kids can send their resumes directly to the HR director of those contractors and have direct dialogue as they get ready to graduate from high school, thus leveraging keeping our youth in the state of Kansas.
Okay, Representative, I'm not sure if you got every answer you wanted, but we could probably have someone circle back and do some research on that. But that's probably the reason that we have in this bill that we will work with industry on an ongoing basis each year to identify the top 10 needs and the top 10 credentials. And I think that's a good thing. Mike, I could talk to you all day, but in the interest of time, we got to move on. There was one more thing I wanted to ask you.
Yes, sir.
You deal with 100 high schools right now, approximately. How do we help expand that? I mean, you got people from all over the state in this room. How do they go home and tell their schools about your program and how to sign up to be the 101st school or the 108th school?
Well, first, we decided through Build Up Kansas to take our message to where the kids how they receive it, and that's through their phones. And so we're spending a lot of money on social media to where of a pop-up, if they're looking at Cabela's or Dick's Sporting Goods or any other outdoor or related website, a pop-up comes up. You get it on your own phones. And we're getting over 4 minutes of viewership. We just surpassed 500,000 landing page hits by these kids. We're also targeting their parents on this to help them understand about the career paths and the pay scales. I would suggest, and we have said this to the executive branch, you have a proven commodity or proven legislation in Senate Bill 155. Right now, we have 4,500 students that are taking our curriculum across the state, just in construction alone. We need 10,000 new workers just in the next 4 or 5 years. So we obviously need more of those kids in the pipeline. I would suggest to you a combination of things. One, maybe organizations like us working with the community colleges, the Department of Ed, to continue to push out to their respective faculty that there's these processes out there to connect their kids, because what we've heard from the kids for the last 3 years through Build Up Kansas, most of them still don't know what industries are in Kansas. Now think about that for a second. If those kids are driving around their community and they aren't paying attention, to whether it be agriculture, whether it be wind turbines, whether it be construction, but they're not. But the kids tell us they're once they become aware, and Build Up Kansas is making them aware of just construction, that they don't know how to connect. And that's where we're connecting them by job postings, where they can have direct dialogue with an HR director to tell them in more depth about what that entry-level job's going to be before they graduate from high school. So I believe that there needs to be a concerted effort, maybe a resolution of some type by this body, directing the Department of Education and Tech Ed and community colleges to have a meeting of the minds with key industries. And again, there's trade associations that represent those industries. I'm not talking about one specific company. One company doesn't represent an industry. A trade association does. And start and we can do that in a relatively short period of time to get people on the same page, to recognize a lot of our higher folks in some of these school districts are now just becoming aware of some of the resources that industry can provide them, because they've thrown their hands up in years past, say, we just don't have the money. There's different ways to skin a cat, not just with hard dollars, in-kind services in a variety of ways. And that's where trade associations can help backfill and grow these things. And by the way, if you get those trade associations involved, they're going to get their members involved. And then you've got champions on both sides, both educators and business, working for the same goal of, one, a good workforce, skilled workforce, and two, keeping our folks in the state. So that would be something that would be extremely helpful, because again, there's a maze. I have found we may be too complicated in our educational hierarchy. I'm still trying to learn it, and I've been here 10 years. I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. The bottom line is, if we don't get workforce, I can assure you that Commerce is going to get a phone call, or you're going to get a phone call if they're in your district, saying, you know what, we have no choice but to move to Texas or Florida or somewhere else. But when that phone call is made, the decision was already made probably 6 months ago. They're just now going to have the press conference. Let's not have that happen, and let's figure out a way to break up the maze, for a better word, because I think we can make that happen in a relatively short period of time.
Okay, I think you misunderstood the question. How do they go home and tell their schools how to participate in your program to learn more?
Well, if this body is willing to do it, I will give each one of you some step-by-step of some questions to ask your school district members, and I will be more than happy to work on that and work with not just this committee, but the entire legislative body.
Perfect. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Representative Clayton had a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for remaining for this last question here. During your testimony, you mentioned the fact that a lot of the remote teaching was decreasing the value of the education. So that kind of got me to thinking, this is a fairly expensive bill. Would you support delaying this implementation for a year until such time as faculty is able to get vaccinated? So that way we're not putting in money to a system that you find to be devalued, but rather we're helping these students, once everyone is safe enough, to attend and to teach in person. Me, I learned how to rewire my kitchen from watching YouTube videos, but I'm just a girl. I'm a little bit different than I think a lot of folks. But what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I appreciate the question. First of all, it's an investment, not just for now, but in the future, that if you wait, you're only delaying the inevitable. Again, we're not waiting for a challenge to come. We're working around it by having industry do virtual presentations and things of that nature. I guess I'll put it in this terms. If you've got a leaky roof right now because the snowpack is on top of it and it's leaking, and you may or may not have all the money to do it, and you say, I'm just going to defer that until I get 100% of that money, the damage that's going to be done from the leak in the roof is going to impact your furniture, your walls, your floors, to where it's going to cost you X times as much money than if you would have addressed it right away. So I would suggest to you, if you would think in that terms, and again, unfortunately, I've got a construction hat on. I don't have much up here, but when I do put my hat on, that's how we kind of like to look at it, that this is an investment that's going to address, because I'm an eternal optimist. COVID, just so you know, since March 1 of last year, when COVID became impacting our state, we worked with our contractors, got the COVID CDC guidelines out there. We have not had one major incident with COVID on a construction job site. And I would suggest to you that as these vaccines become prevalent, as we continue to operate with the CDC guidelines, that we're going to get back in class a lot sooner versus later. But the fact is, just like that leaky roof, let's not defer. Let's not defer, because every time we defer, our younger generation gets further and further behind.
All right, so you do think that the quality of education that's being provided is good, and that is great to know. I really appreciate it.
The industry has never questioned that. Like I said, we will work with the challenges, and like I said, I've got subject matter experts going to work with those VOTEC directors to give those kids the stimulus while they're temporarily juggling with the fact that they can't drive a nail, or they can't weld, or they can't do anything of that nature. There's different ways to stimulate and keep people involved.
I'm certainly not going to let somebody work on my brakes that hasn't done it. If they watch a video, I'm out. But if they have hands-on learning, I'm in. That's crazy. It's been proven that this age group is not susceptible to this disease. The schools are opening up, minus the schools that are the least performing in Kansas, mind you. And those are the kids that we really need to target, so it'd be great to get them into a program like this so that they could actually learn something for once.
Agree 100%, and like I said, I'm an eternal optimist, because we already are overcoming a lot of challenges from just a year ago. And it's interesting how medical technology is able to adapt quickly to address the challenges before us. But we're going to get there, and we're going to get there quickly. But this is another, like I said at the beginning of my presentation, this is another spoke in the wheel of that hub called workforce development education. And the more spokes we have with that hub, the stronger that hub gets. And the stronger the hub gets, the stronger the wheel can move.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to the online testimony. Matt Lindsay, you're up next. Kansas Independent College Association.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. My name is Matt Lindsay. I'm the president of the Kansas Independent College Association. So I speak on behalf of the 20 accredited nonprofit colleges across the state. You have my testimony. I come in support of the bill, and note that while we do not have among the private colleges near the number of programs that would be eligible that you would see at the community colleges or the technical colleges, we still do have some of those kinds of programs, and especially at a couple of schools, Donnelly College in Kansas City, Kansas, and Heston College in Heston, which are both primarily two-year institutions. But several others as well have invested or have considered investing more in these the programs that I would suspect would be eligible support here. So we're grateful for inclusion in the way the authors of the bill came up with the idea and the ability to contribute to the economic development of the state of Kansas, to the betterment of the workforce in the state of Kansas. And I want to reiterate something that Ms. Morgan noted, that this is an economic development bill. This is a rural development bill. And in that sense, we should be using all of the tools at our disposal to meet those goals. And our tools are not limited, or your tools are not limited to just the public universities and the public community colleges, that the private colleges are a part of that effort to improve the economic development and rural development of the state, and we're proud to do that. I do not suspect that we would have a significant portion of the funding in this program. I mean, we have far fewer programs, far fewer students in these kinds of fields. But to be included, to make sure that we can contribute in a productive way is something we're grateful for. I do want to make sure I speak back to Mr. Chairman. You had a question. I think you asked Ms. Morgan earlier, and so the bill does not require us to lower our tuition to a certain extent. I would argue that the market will force us to be competitive with the community and technical colleges. That if we're offering an identical program to one of them and offering it not at the same price point or competitively, we're not going to get any students anyway. We're subject to significant market forces for the private colleges in the state of Kansas, because we're not the Harvards and Stanfords of the world. So we don't command the type of market power to just set our tuition willy-nilly that way. So I wholly expect that we would have programs that would be price competitive even with this support. With that, I'm happy to answer questions as they come.
Thank you. So if you're sure the colleges will adjust to the market, then you probably wouldn't have a problem with us just going ahead and amending the bill to say that, right?
I would have a problem with that, in that we're not, at no point have we ever had a state bill that mandated a certain tuition level for private colleges. I think our colleges would immediately say we're less interested in engaging in that kind of precedent setting.
Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Greg Nichols, Vice President from Kansas Technical College. He's virtual.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Chairman Tarwater and members of the committee. Thanks for taking the opportunity, or taking the time to allow me to comment on support in the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act on behalf of the Kansas Association of Technical Colleges. I am vice president of our association, but I am also president of Salina Area Technical College. So I do know a fair amount about some of the topics that we have been discussing, or you've been asking questions about. I do have a written statement. I'm not going to read that. I'm going to kind of highlight some things for this committee in support of the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act. Students from Kansas Technical Colleges, the students graduate at a rate that is among the highest in the nation. They become employed in their field at greater than 90% proficiency. And in some programs, it's as much as 100%. We feel like over 90% of our students graduate and work in the state of Kansas. That supports the economic growth, and for the local communities, it supports the tax basis. It also supports those local schools and so forth, kind of repeating that cycle that we've all been hearing about today. A couple of things that we wrote in our testimony. I want to point out a return on investment. We talk about the commerce, Kansas commerce, and how are we going to grow our economy? How are we going to attract other businesses? Return on investment, a Georgetown University Center for Education and Workforce indicated that all 7 Kansas technical colleges rank in the upper 44% of the nation's 4,500 colleges and universities in terms of their return on investment. You may look at some of the top 5 schools in the state include KU and K-State, but the number one return on investment was one of the tech colleges, Washburn Institute of Technology, and then also Manhattan Tech and North Central Tech. Those are really comparing all levels of the college, whether it's a 2-year college or a 4-year college or a university that has graduate programs. That return on investment is significant. That's a 40-year look at how much you've invested in your future earnings. So we feel like that's an important metric that really speaks to the value of technical education. One thing that we want to emphasize is the students who pursue that Associate of Applied Science or that technical certificate, they have the highest percentage of employability and marketability, according to an article from the Institute Inside Higher Education, dated last August 2 years ago in 2019. It's greater than 75%. Now that's in comparison to the baccalaureate or the Associate of Arts or Science degree that came in at about 65% each. So we know that those technical fields are specifically more marketable and the students are more employable in that area. I think you probably understand that as well as anybody in the state. One other thing I want to kind of point out is that if we're talking about growing our economy and sustaining our current economy, and one of the things that we need to do, and we realize that as technical colleges, we need to continue that workforce training. It's not just attracting new people, it's retraining and upskilling those that are currently there. So the Brookings Institute, they did a study and published it. And what they said that was for economic development leaders, the message was that workforce drives business site selection. What that means for me is if I'm not producing that workforce, those businesses may not be coming to Kansas. So if all of the 26 public and the 2 private 2-year colleges don't create that technical education workforce and drive that workforce, we're going to end up losing out on some of those decisions for businesses locating in Kansas or even expanding in Kansas. The other thing that I think was important in that is the return on investment from customized job training incentives as measured by job creation is about 10 times that of traditional tax incentives. So when we incent a company to come into our state with maybe it's a tax reduction or a period of time or something like that, those are valuable. There's no question about it. But this magnifies that. These customized job training programs, this kind of thing. We mentioned Excel and CTE, commonly known as Senate Bill 155 earlier in the discussion. I've been in Kansas for most of my life. I've been in higher education greater than 25 years. And what I've been in the south central part of the state, south of Wichita. I've been in western Kansas. I'm now in Salina and north central Kansas. So manufacturing is really a large part of what we do. Ag is, of course, we have a very large geographic state, and agriculture is an incredibly important part of what we do. But I think not everybody realizes that growth in manufacturing is going to be essential as well. The mechanizing of farm equipment and the precision ag and things like that. There's more people getting into that part of the agriculture business, which requires fewer labor workers, but manufacturing still requires that number of welders or machinists or something in those areas. So we're finding that working with our industry, industries in our local areas, we really hit those markets very well in terms of what they need in their job production, what they need in their workforce production. We feel like this Promise Scholars Act, I think it was, I can't remember who it was that said it before, but this won't hit those very low income students in a lot of cases. But technical education is a little bit more expensive to deliver than maybe a regular Associate of Arts or Science degree. So the cost to deliver that education is a little bit more. So we feel like there will be some that are in that, they're kind of caught in the middle. Their families earn a little bit more than what they would be eligible for a Pell Grant, for example, but they may not really have enough to go to a large university. Maybe the tuition cost is a little bit more, or even in some respects to the private colleges here in the state. So this act, I think, will really meet what is needed in our economy for that group. I concur with most of the folks in the sentiment that it's not going to be a large number of people, but it does fill that next level gap. And I think I can't remember who it was, but maybe it was Representative Williams asked a question about narrowing the skills gap. I would refer you to, there's a website, Kansas Board of Regents, kansasregents.org. I believe there's a statistics on the credentials earned. So we do have some of that data. I can circle it back around if you so desire. But we are producing a little bit more, not much, but a little bit more in terms of those associate degree and technical certificate from what we were maybe 5 or 6 years ago. What we're finding, though, is that's not filling the gap because the baby boom generation is leaving the workforce at a greater rate than we're replenishing. So I would say that this is a great investment to maybe stop that decline in that workforce and maybe replenish that and keep the kids that are here. With that, I will stand for any questions. I'd be happy to impart any knowledge that I might have.
Thanks, Greg. We do have one question for you. Representative Iwerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Nichols. So for your tech colleges, do you have a percentage of your students who are at your school and are currently employed? They're currently employed and their employer is sending them to your school to learn something or to further develop their skill?
So I don't have a number right off the top of my head in terms of our number of students that are employed. I would say that in some of our programs, in our nursing program in particular, we do get direct, the students will get direct aid from those employers to have them come out in our nursing program. I think we're working with a lot of other industries to try and help in that respect. And so the way it works is they agree to either pay for a year of education and the student agrees to work for them for at least a year after that. It's kind of a pay it back or pay it forward kind of concept. And we're working with a couple of manufacturers on expanding that kind of program. The challenge is that the employers want them to work, 40 or maybe even more hours per week, but it's a challenge to meet the time to go to school as well. So we have a couple of agreements out there for a reduced workload and allow them to come to school on a part-time basis. So I don't have specific numbers on that. I can tell you that it's definitely, we probably in our nursing program probably have somewhere around 20 or 30 different institutions that are paying for that student to come here.
Follow up, you good?
I'll be quick, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So the reason for the question, looking at this bill and where the money's coming from. It seems kind of like a government approach to solve an industry problem. In my mind, I don't like that approach. I think if it's an industry problem, the industry would do a better job solving it. So rather than being another government program to hand out dollars, I would look at it more of a tax credit, if you will, to businesses that would allow them to send employees to your tech schools. And that would really drive the industry to work with the tech schools to provide the education they need. That was the reason for the question, just which angle do we approach it? Do we approach it from the industry or from government? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good point. Any other questions? Seeing none. Committee, we don't have any neutral or opponents on this. Representative Clayton did want to read the governor's veto message, but she had to leave. So I asked her to just go ahead and email that. You can go ahead and do whatever you like with it. I'd also like to tell you that, Mr. Gibson, you'll be happy to know that the Johnson County Community College and the community colleges agree with you that in-person, hands-on education is the best, and that students cannot learn these types of skills over the internet, and they are in person on every class that requires hands-on experience, including their nursing classes and automotive classes and on and on and on. So I'm sure Representative Clayton would have liked to have been here to hear that, but she'll have to listen to the recording. Thank you. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn.